Welcome to a step-by-step video tutorial for one of my favorite cakes in the whole wide world. My name is Ella from Chatty Cupcakes, and my mom and I have been making cakes and cupcakes together for over a decade. This particular design is so cool because the whole thing is made with only one piping nozzle, which is kind of crazy for as detailed and floral-based as it is. But that's just how versatile the Wilton Tip 104 is, and while we'll be walking through this chosen color scheme, the same design can be done in any range of hues, so the whole concept is incredibly adaptable and manageable despite looking relatively complex. While you can work on any sized round cake, my favorite look is a 4 layers 6-inch. You do need the height of 4 layers no matter your circumference. I'm filling and crumb coating my vanilla cake with authentic French buttercream, and I'll be doing the rest of the decorations with Swiss meringue buttercream. While our crumb-coated cake rests in the fridge, we'll color our Swiss meringue. Since the butter content makes this a naturally off-white frosting, we have to keep in mind the yellow undertones while we color it. I'm going for a distinct shade of blue, but you can see when you start with only a few drops of royal blue gel coloring, we first make a green. So we'll add a bit more blue and 1 drop of coal black, which will mute the shade ever so slightly and just really finalize this lovely color. Then we smooth coat the cake and refrigerate. Once you're content with the base buttercream layer, we'll refrigerate the cake and begin growing our Wilton Tip 104 flower garden. We're going to be making 3 types of flowers and leaves. The repetition of making enough flowers to cover the cake is incredible practice for perfecting your floral work. You ultimately can't have enough of each flower, so settle in, get some snacks and good tunes, and prepare to become a buttercream flower master by the time you finish this cake. We'll be covering 3 sizes in this video using the Wilton Tip 104 for each. When grouped together, these flowers make up an advanced buttercream hydrangea or individually make fabulous filler flowers in a bouquet. Since they're so small, I'm keeping their coloring simple with only 1 shade of light burgundy wine. When holding the piping bag in your dominant hand, I recommend filling it sparingly with buttercream so that you can wrap the excess bag around your pointer finger, caressing the weight of the bag in your palm and applying pressure with your middle, ring, and pinky fingers. This effectively helps the buttercream not to ooze out of the top of the bag and gives you more control with your designs. As you can see, this tip is triangle shaped in nature, so I will be referencing the fat bottom part of the triangle and the skinny tip. We'll begin with the most basic 1-layer 4-petaled flower. Starting with the fat bottom part of the triangle touching the center of the flower, now we simply squeeze with the piping hand and allow the tip to do most of the work in creating the shape. There's an ever so subtle U shape that you're drawing with the tip to help the roundness of the outer petal, but you want to keep these flowers as small as the tip itself, so the movements remain small as well. Each new petal begins in the same center starting point, touching side by side until you close that last gap with the 4th petal. To easily upgrade this flower, simply mimic the same 4 petals right on top of the first layer. Next, we'll try the same flower with 5 petals to give it a little bigger presence on your canvas. Don't forget to double layer it, keeping the skinny tip of the triangle angled slightly more vertically to give it some realistic dimension. These are quite reminiscent of English daisies, dainty still and small enough to be a filler flower in a bouquet, but eye-catching enough to warrant a variegated coloring. In one bowl, I have burgundy wine colored buttercream, and in the next, a natural white. I'm going to mix in 1 spoonful of pink into the white so that the contrast between the 2 colors isn't so stark on the flowers. To fill the piping bag, I drape the edges over my fingers, creating a cup effect, and spoon the darker buttercream into my hand, careful to stay only on that half of the bag. Then the white fills the other half. Since I want these petal flowers to have a darker center with lighter edges, I make sure the fat bottom part of the triangle is on the side with the dark pink buttercream and the skinny tip of the triangle is on the lighter side. As you pipe your flowers, you can always adjust your tip to get the exact level of variegation you're aiming for. Again, we begin these flowers with the fat bottom part of the tip touching the center of the flower nail. We squeeze with our piping hand while simultaneously drawing a skinny U shape on the nail up and back down to that initial starting point. This flower can have anywhere between 7 and 9 petals per layer. The second half of this flower is simply mimicking the design right on top, this time drawing slightly shorter U's so that the petals aren't as tall as the base layer, but are overlapping at a 1-to-1 ratio. You can experiment with the size of these petals by using a larger or smaller size flower nail. That acts as a helpful guide to maintain symmetry and size. We'll be using the Wilton Tip 104, focusing on rose buds, small English roses, and fully bloomed roses. Regardless of what size rose you plan to pipe, we'll always start with our squeegee core in the center of the flower nail. Then, holding the fat bottom part of the triangle, touching the flower nail, and maintaining constant pressure with your piping hand, draw a rainbow shape, tracing and ultimately maintaining contact with that core. Up and back down to the flower nail. Start your next petal at the base of the halfway point of your last, drawing another rainbow overlapping the first petal, up and back down. Each new petal begins at the base of the halfway point of your last petal. Usually your third petal, sometimes fourth, will meet the starting part of the first petal. This is a rosebud. Each new petal hereafter blooms the rose further, but you can now stop anytime along the way for various sized roses. As it reaches fuller bloomed territory, you'll notice your piping hand starting to naturally angle more parallel with the table. Less vertical petals, they start becoming more horizontal. Once you have a relatively symmetrical rose, you can call her fully bloomed. English roses. While this term may not be horticulturally accurate, I simply mean this version of a small rose I've created here. Once you pipe a standard rosebud, make 4 side-by-side petals around the circumference of the bud, instead of overlapping at their centers. Then repeat those 4 petals right on top of each other. You can fill in with one-off petals if the asymmetry is too bothersome, but they are like little fully bloomed roses with significantly less buttercream. We'll be covering 3 types of leaves, all using the Wilton Tip 104. To amplify the realism of buttercream leaves, I recommend making them two-toned. First, I start with a small dot of leaf green gel food coloring and separate out 2 sections of buttercream in the same bowl. To only 1 section of buttercream, I added a little bit of black gel food coloring. A little bit does go a very long way. The difference on camera is subtle, but it's an easy way to elevate any garden design. Put the darker color on the side with the fat bottom part of the triangle and light buttercream at the skinny tip. This is the exact path your piping hand will follow on the flower nail as you maintain constant squeezing. For leaf design number 1, hold the fat bottom part of the triangle tip off to the one edge of the flower nail. Once you get to the top, try to come back down in one fluid motion without letting go of the bag. The shakier you allow your piping hand to be, the more realistic the leaf will look. Feel free to experiment with different sizes on your flower nail. The second leaf follows that same out and back path, but really leans into the shaky piping hand. The last kind of leaf is made up of tiny petal squeezes that outline the leaf's path. This one is really fun because you can use your flower nail as a guide for a curved shape. Once you've made enough of each kind of flower and leaf, that is to say, so many, welcome to Buttercream floral expertise. Put them all into the freezer for at least an hour. The more frozen they are, the easier they'll be to work with. Then it becomes time to finish off our beautiful cake. We're going to cover the entire top with flowers, so I'm drawing guidelines with the straight side of my palette knife to help dictate symmetry. Then it's just a matter of popping our flowers into place. This part is really fun and lets your creativity shine. I wanted to do cascading flowers tapering down to my smallest petals. I have a bit of green buttercream in my Wilton Tip 104 piping bag to dot on a bit of frosting glue and suture each flower into place. Because the cake and the flowers are both cold, they will adhere very securely, so make sure you're confident in your placement. Since we only used one tip for this entire cake design, you'll notice the center of some of our flowers are a bit lacking, but not to fear. Pop in some edible sugar pearls. I went with shimmery pink ones right into the center of each flower. Nothing can be easier than that. I also adorned the cake in between the falling flower sections with the pearls to juxtapose the floral theme with the jewel effect. Again, endless practice is the only way to improve your buttercream flowers. You'll never sit down as a beginner and make a perfect rose, but your 7th rose will be so much better than your 6th, and so on. That's what makes this particular cake so amazing. It forces you to repeat the motions and master one piping tip, in my opinion, the best one. And in the end, you're left with a beautiful display of your efforts. I hope you love this design and enjoy recreating it. If you want to see more, please like and subscribe to our page.